During this video tutorial, we will walk through the various tools that are available to you for the ChAS database. We will walk through the ChAS database status. This is a screen that will tell us how many samples and segments are currently loaded into our ChAS database, as well as tell us which ChAS database we are pointing to. Are we pointing to the one that's on our local workstation, or perhaps one that is on a shared server? We will learn how to back up as well as restore a ChAS database. We will also see how to clean up the ChAS database. The ChAS database does have a script that runs automatically that will reindex itself and clean itself up, but if you find that your database might be running a little slow and you want to try a manual cleanup, we'll see the link on how to do that. And we'll talk a little bit about role creation. There are 3 different roles that are available when interacting with the ChAS database, and we'll talk about those 3 different roles and the levels of access. We'll see how to log in to a shared ChAS database, as well as work in what we'll call offline or airplane mode. So in offline mode, if I'm going to be offline from a shared ChAS DB, how I can do a backup and restore to my local laptop so that I can access all those resources in the shared ChAS DB while I am offline and unable to connect to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and start up ChAS. So I went ahead and double-clicked ChAS, and now I've chosen my user profile of Seagates. And so the next step now is I want to log into the database. And so I'm going to use the default password that comes with the installer, which is all lowercase admin and the password of admin. So this is a brand new installation of ChAS, and so we can see here that I have nothing in my histograms, at least for chromosome 1. And so let's go ahead and see how do we access these ChAS database tools. We come up here to ChAS DB and choose Database Tools. And now it's going to automatically launch through a browser, and it depends on what your default browser is, whether it's Internet Explorer 11, Firefox, or Chrome. You may see a slightly different look to what you see here on my screen. We're going to sign into ChAS. And again, I don't have to be on the internet to see this screen. It is just using the internet browsers that I have on my laptop in order to view this screen. So I'm going to log in with admin and admin again and sign in. So now we come to the ChAS database homepage. It basically tells us what types of things we can do in this database tools page. So the first one I want to talk about is status. So we'll click on status. It tells me the time, the database version, which is HG19, and how many samples and segments are in my database. And again, this is a brand new installation, so I haven't uploaded any samples as of yet. So I have 0 and 0. Now we'll go to the maintenance page. This is where we can do a backup and restore of our database. So if I want to do a backup because I'm either going to share my data or I just want to keep a safe copy of it just in case for later, I simply can click on backup. And it tells me that it's going to create a backup of my database in my Affymetrix ChAS Postgres backups folder. And I'll show you where that is. And it gives it a standard name of ChAS database with the year, month, date, hour, minute, and second .backup. You will see a warning here not to leave this page until the backup operation is complete. It just depends on the size of the database as to how long that will take. I'm going to go ahead and click backup here. Again, I don't have any data in my database, so it'll be a fairly short process. And what you're looking for is this nice green message that it has been successfully backed up before you leave this page. Okay, so I'm going to minimize this window and go to the location of the backup. So it will be, in my case, it's on my C drive. It just depends on where you installed your database. If you installed it on the D drive, it will be there, or X drive. It just depends on where you installed it. So I'm going to my C drive, Affymetrix, ChAS. And we've already worked with the library folder during the installation process. We now have this PostgreSQL folder and backups. And this is where the backups will reside. So here we see January 6, 2015 at 10:32. It's currently 10:33. So this was the backup I just made. Again, very small because I don't have any data in my database. And as I mentioned during the installation video, as a general rule of thumb, for every 1,000 samples that are uploaded into the database, it takes about a gig of hard drive space. So just a general rule to keep in mind when you're thinking about where to install your database. Okay, so that's where the backups are stored. And now let me go back to our maintenance page. And all right, so we've seen how to do a backup. Now how do we do a restore? We're going to click on the restore button. And again, it's giving us this message saying, really don't leave this page until you've seen that nice green message letting you know that the database has been successfully restored. We're going to click Browse. And one of the things that happens during a restore function is a backup is automatically created. So it is always a good idea to go ahead and do that manual backup, but when you're doing the restore function, it will go ahead and back up the current database that you have. So these are the different backups I have. I'm going to go ahead and go to my desktop and use a backup that I had made previously. We can see it's 297 KB, so I'm going to select that backup, and it's sitting on my desktop, and click Open. Okay, so it's letting me know this is the database you're going to back up, and I'm going to hit Restore. Now I get this warning that's going to let me know, okay, you are about to overwrite. Now granted, I don't have any data in that current database, but I'm going to overwrite it with my new database. But what will happen is it will make a backup of the previous one again, even though there's no data in it. Say OK. The restore will take various times depending on how big that database is. So mine was pretty quick because the database is fairly small that I restored. It only has somewhere around 25 samples in it. All right, so we have successfully restored. And now let's go to the browser. So here I am in ChAS browser. Now I've restored that database, but in order for the browser to realize that, I'm going to go up here to ChASDB and say refresh my data in that database that I just restored. And there we go. We now have data that we can query against in our database. By looking at a mouse over, so I do have, if you look at the bin value, I have 25 files in this particular database. So now let's go back to our database tools and go back to maintenance. So we've done backup, we've done restore, and now let's talk about cleaning up the database. We just click on this button right here, and you do have to have admin privileges in order to see this button. But we'll say clean up database, which is where it does this re-indexing. I hit clean up, and it just takes a very short time. Again, it's going to depend on the size of the database, and I get this nice green message letting me know, all right, successfully cleaned up. And the last function we're going to talk about when it comes to the database tools is the administration function, which is where we edit users. And before we go in and see how to do this, let's talk about the different roles that we have as options. So there's a user role, which will allow somebody to query the ChAS database and then use all the functions in the browser that have been previously available, such as modifying segments, adding a sample type, adding segment annotations, such as calls and interpretations, and just using ChAS as we have in the past, but having that additional ability to query the ChAS database to see what segments in my current sample intersect with segments in my database. Then we have the manager level. The manager level can do everything a user can do, but has that additional option of uploading segment data. So they can add data to the database or overwrite data in the database. They can also do a backup and restore of the ChAS database. And an admin has all those functions, plus it can can assign new users and passwords. So let's go ahead and go back to our administration. We're going to click on Edit Users. And now, here was the default admin. And you can see I created another one with my login. So let's go ahead and add another user. So I can make a username of JDoe and get their email address. And we'll fill in then their first name, last name, and a password. And we got to type that password again. And then what is their level of security user? They're going to be a user. So again, they'll be able to interact with the database, but they can't upload data. And we can say accept. So now I can log out and sign back in as Jane Doe. And see, we now have maintenance that is grayed out because a user cannot do a backup and restore. And then they also cannot access administration because they can't add new users. But they can see the status of the database, which again, remember, is 25 samples. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out and go back to my admin. And then one other comment is the default installer is admin for all ChAS 3.0 installations. So if you want to, you can go in and edit the admin password to make it something more secure other than admin, which is the default for everyone. All right, now we've walked through backup and restore and how to add users. Now let's go to how do I point to a different server? So right now, in my database tools, when I see local host, I know that I am looking at the database on my current workstation. So now let's go back into ChAS and go under Preferences here and choose Edit Application Configuration. By default, it's using the system proxy. If you need to use a custom proxy, you can work with your IT department to see what that is. And I go to the ChAS database server. And now all I need to do is type in the computer name or the server name of a workstation or server that is on my domain. So in this case, I have a workstation that is somewhere else at AFI that I want to log into that ChAS database. And I say OK. It's going to let me know that it's now going to attempt. And I may have to re-enter my password. OK. And now I have logged into that machine, and you can tell my histograms have changed. I now have a different set of histograms than we were just viewing. And so if I do the mouse over, we can see here that in my bin value, instead of 25 files, I have 10 files, just to show that I'm looking at a different database. And if there's ever a question as to which database you're pointing to, you can go to ChASDB Database Tools. And now instead of localhost, we'll see that I see W7 LC3C, the name of that computer. So this tells me that I'm looking at another database that's on a different workstation. So I'm signing in, and let me just go back to status to show, yes, there's 10 samples and 130 segments as opposed to the database that I had. And if I want to go back, okay, I'm done looking at this one. I want to come back to my local database. I can go back and just set back to the defaults. So I go back to Preferences, Edit Application Configuration, ChASDB Server, and then hit the default. And that puts in my local host. OK. And now it's going to attempt to come back. And again, we see that the histograms change, so I know that I'm in my database that's on my local laptop. OK, now let's talk about the last thing, which is working in this offline mode. Let's go back to the slides so that we could just get an overall picture of what this means. So the idea of offline mode is if I am at an organization where typically when I'm at my desk, I am linked into a shared ChASDB that I share with others at my organization, and we all upload data to this central database. But yet I'm going to a conference, and I want to be able to take an instance of this ChAS database with me so that I can work offline and get all the advantages of being able to query the resources in this ChAS database, but not be hooked up to it directly because I don't have internet access. So what I can do is I'm user 1. I can log in, like we just did, to a shared ChAS database, then do a backup. So I back up that database. I then copy it over to my workstation. You don't have to copy it over. Depends on firewall privileges. Sometimes it's just easier to go ahead and grab that zip file, that backup file, and copy it to your local workstation. But it is not absolutely necessary. You can certainly try to do the restore and point to that backup. And then once the zipped file is back over to your laptop, you would then go back, redirect that your ChAS DB to your local host. So now that I'm looking at my local laptop ChAS DB, and restore that backup. And then now my local ChAS DB will be looking at the database, the resources from this shared ChAS database. Now when I get to my final destination and I'm back home and I want to re-access the ChAS database, again I would just point to the ChAS database like we've done, and the shared ChAS DB. And now any files that I may have analyzed while offline, I would need to upload at that point. So once you're hooked back up into this shared ChAS database, that's when you can go ahead and upload the files that you may have been analyzing while in this offline mode. Okay, so let's quickly go through those steps. So here, step 1, I'm going on a trip. So first, I am normally logged into my shared ChAS database at my organization that everyone uses. So we're going to go ahead and simulate that. All right, we see that I am now that the histograms have changed, I'm now on my shared ChAS database. I'm going on a trip though. So I want to go to my database tools, and I'm going to go to maintenance, and I'm going to back up that database. So it's letting me know don't leave this page until you have finished the backup. And now I've done that particular backup. So now I come back here. I say, all right, I've done that backup. I am going to edit my application configuration, DB server, and I want to point back now to my local. So now I can see that I'm currently pointing to the local database that I've been using. But now I'm going to go back and go to, you can either launch the ChAS database tools again or go back to the tab that contains your local host and now do maintenance, restore, and then browse. So we would browse to that particular backup that we've just made and restore it. Okay, so now we are looking at as we can tell by the histograms, we are looking at my local ChAS database. And so what I want to do is restore that backup that I made on the other workstation, the other shared ChAS database. So I copied that zip file over to my desktop here. So we can see it's 06, so January 6th, 2015. This is the one I just made at 10:46. And now I'm going to go and restore this particular instance of the database. So I do want to make sure that I choose my local host tab, or just to be safe, what you can do is quit out of all these and say ChAS DB database tools. And now again, I'm pointing to my local host, which means I am back to pointing to the one that is on my laptop. Click sign in. And now we can do a maintenance, restore. I want to browse to the file that I pulled over from my shared ChAS database, which is this one. Say open and restore. And again, it's letting me know you're going to overwrite your current database. Is that okay? And you know what? It makes a backup of my database and I have it backed up. I feel confident, so I'm going to say okay. And now let me go to the browser. And the restore function, the browser doesn't realize that it has been restored, so we do need to tell it, ChASDB refresh that database. And so now we're looking at the same data that we saw when we were actually linked into the ChAS database on that shared server, but instead I'm looking at it on my local laptop. So now I can take my laptop, be offline, and be able to use all the resources that are in that shared database. And then when I get back from my trip and I'm ready to log in to the shared ChAS database, I can do that, again, just by preferences, edit application, put in that computer name, link up to that shared database, and then upload any data or publish any data that I may have been analyzing a while away, and so that others at my organization can also benefit from those samples being added to the database. So in this module, we learned how to do backups and restore, what it means and how to do working in offline mode, and how to add different users and their roles for accessing the ChAS database. Thank you.